Hello everyone. Today I'm going to do a cozy in-game book reading, deep diving into the lore surrounding the book and seeing where our adventure takes us. Our book is found in the game Guild Wars 2 and within the Secrets of Obscure expansion. There may be some story spoilers, so please proceed with caution. Today's book is called An Unofficial History of the Wizard's Court, Volume 1 through 4. Volume 1 is found in the Wizard's Ascent, located above Briella's kitchen point of interest. By A. Hawthorn, signed 716 AE. Forward, I suppose. Isgarin tasked me with writing out a complete history of the Wizard's Court by hand. I'm pretty sure this is torture for asking his age during the reading of the latest scroll translation. Had that smug little grin on his face again. Forever kicking myself over not accepting Waiting Sorrow's invitation to join her at the Bastion of the Celestial. I've been sitting in the library for hours. Basic records, books of spells, anything and everything you need to know about the potency of poisonous flora found in the underworld. Things I already know, having served as the leading archivist for 2 decades. Nothing personal about Akeem or Vass. Nothing about Isgarin's time before the court was founded. I suppose that raises the conundrum. I've been a leading archivist on the Bastion for 23 years, and my knowledge is embarrassingly limited compared to his. Isgarin's rambling about the prior cycle have already given me pause, but more recently, they have drawn my attention to the fact that he's keeping that knowledge just out of reach from all but Mabon, maybe Sorrow. How isn't there a history of the court already? After Volume 1, I wanted to look a little more into Waiting Sorrow. According to the Guild Wars 2 Wiki, Waiting Sorrow is an ancient female Coden wizard. She is a former member of the Wizard's Court and former leader of the Bastion of the Celestial, and left relatively recently on somewhat precarious terms. Before leaving, Waiting Sorrow crafted the Heart of the Obscure, a device that channels emotions and can open and seal rifts, and left it behind for another wizard to find. She was the mentor, as well as close friend, or even soulmate, of the ancient female Jotun, Dagda. The wiki does a really great job introducing Waiting Sorrows, and at the same time curates curiosity around the relationship. Now Dagda does have a diary that is found in her room located in the Wizard's Tower. Heading towards the inner sanctorium, we'll find our diary here. Some days I can tolerate Isgarin's mental games, and others I cannot. Ever since Sorrow's sudden departure, my patience with him has lessened. I can't help but think that he pushed her away from us, but I must remind myself to breathe. Lear's presence has been a boon on this front. He is always there to cool my ever-boiling blood. After all, I am now a leader of this place. I need to, per Lear's encouragement, behave. Some of the newer recruits are unsettled by our appearances. Lear usually gets a delighted response, given that he isn't made of stone. But Isgarin, Mabon, and I are usually met with fear. Mabon chose to hide his wings to lessen the dear presence of a Mursat, and Isgarin has taken on a blue complexion, hoping that he may be mistaken for a djinn. But why is it that the presence of a Jotun, and a woman at that, is so shocking? I realize that my people are different now than they were when I was rescued those many years ago. But for Isgarin to ask me to hide myself, to change myself, no. I could have killed him on the spot, but I knew I'd be dead before the thought finished, or worse. Days like today make me want to drop everything and find her, Waiting Sorrow. I should be angry, but she was always a warm voice in the swirling, terrifying expanse of the cosmos. I realize that she broke about every rule in the book by leaving with her powers intact, but I will always wonder why. I will always miss her. I find it nice to explore Waiting Sorrow's story a bit. Maybe we will see them in the story to come, or perhaps not. And it's just nice to get a little bit more context, as the Secrets of Obscure expansion is centered around the Heart of Obscure, which we know was built by Waiting Sorrow. So it's nice to start to paint a picture before we as the commander jumped into the story. To further add to this, we have an old letter addressed to Dagda from S, which given the information above would have me believe it is from Waiting Sorrow. The old letter can be found in the Wizard's Tower and in the Inner Sanctorium. Dagda, I must be swift. Should Isgarin catch on to my plan before I'm able to depart, I've decided to leave this place. I've been here for 1,000 years too long, I think. My mind hurts, and it yearns. For beings that know all, I don't know enough. Not about myself. Something bubbles beneath my flesh, swirling in the back of my mind, that I can't quite reach. It crawls and bites. Last time Isgarin heard of my reservations, he asked if I wanted to die. It wasn't a hostile remark, but I reject the notion that there isn't a path forward that doesn't involve moving to the next wave of existence. So, I depart. I love no other more than I love you, my sister. You are the closest thing to a soulmate I need. But I have seen the cards, and I know that you will find another. Just be patient. Find comfort in the fact that we are channeling the same stars. S. The old letter confirms just how close Waiting Sorrow and Dagda were. And while the term soulmate was used, it is not necessarily meant in a romantic tone, but could be a closeness you find in a friend that you consider them your own family, which could be why she referred to Dagda as sister. However, reading You Will Find Another has me also believing there could be more, and calling Dagda her sister could have just been more of a comrade salutation. Let's move onward to Volume 2, located in the Bastion of Knowledge in Omnitas. An Unofficial History of the Wizard's Court, Volume 2, by A. Hawthorn, signed 716 AE. The more dead ends I encounter while attempting to piece together a meaningful timeline of the foundation of the Wizard's Court to present, the more I realize. A history of the court would simply be a history of Isgarin himself. I am at least a little excited to venture down this path, as I've spent my entire time in the Astral Ward focusing on watching the continued escalation in Ilona, for which Isgarin has shown a little interest, which shocks me given his impassioned hatred for the demonic. In the absence of attainable records, I've decided to gather information on the curator by posing a question to the other chairs. Mabon, Waiting Sorrow, and Dagda, two of whom were most definitely from the same era as Isgarin himself, being from the elder races of Tyria. I spoke with Mabon first. Given that he spends a great deal of time holed up in the private reading rooms of the library, he seemed bemused when I told him of Isgarin's little assignment, shocked even, but offered little beyond what we all already know, that Mabon was Isgarin's first recruit. Mabon paused for a few moments, reflecting on that time. He noted the war between the Seers and the Mersat. Isgarin spared him, supposedly, and for that, Mabon will always be in his debt. He didn't say much else of note. He was quiet, and I expected him to be. So I find myself asking at this point, who is A. Hawthorn? I feel I should have asked this back in Volume 1, but I got distracted going down the rabbit hole on Waiting Sorrow, which I felt I only scratched the surface on. Knowing I still had 3 more volumes to cover, I pressed on. We know from the prior volumes that we read that Hawthorn was an archivist. When doing a quick search on Hawthorn, I only come across these 4 volumes and one other book, the Binding Net of Sidereal. This book is also found in the Grand Library in Omnitas. A. Hawthorn, signed 719. Following many instances of trauma where one or more ward members have fallen to their demise, Dagda and Isgarin have crafted what they are calling the Net of Sidereal. As far as I can tell, this net extends from the spire itself, and by using some aura tracing sensibilities, it is then able to determine when someone has fallen too far from the bounds of Omnitas. It pulls them back to a sensible height, gently placing them on safe ground once again. Many ward members are reacting by jumping from their bastions, eager to test new magic. While I appreciate their taste for research, this archivist will not be participating. So digging deeper into this, I found a little piece of trivia on the Guild Wars 2 Wiki. It is a nod to the in-game mechanic that teleports players to safety when they fall out of bounds in Omnitas. This book is also signed in 719, assuming AE, which would be 3 years after our Volume 1 and 2. AE in Guild Wars refers to after the Exodus, and BE would be before. The Exodus referring to when the gods left Tyria. So this book was signed 719 years after the gods left Tyria, and the current present day would be considered 1336 AE. Moving on to our Volume 3, we are still in the Grand Library in Omnitas. An Unofficial History of the Wizard's Court, Volume 3, by A. Hawthorn, signed 716 AE. I expected Waiting Sorrow to be the more gentle of the three, but I was damn wrong. I encountered her attuning the conduits that kept Omnitas fixed in the clouds. Usually mundane work for someone of her skill, but as I approached I noticed the furrow in her brow. Perhaps she was not in the mood to talk of the past. When I mentioned I wanted to learn more of Vas and Hakim, her expression went blank. She watched me for a moment too long before simmering into a quiet rage. Not at me, perhaps, but I'd certainly hit a nerve. Wouldn't it be nice knowing what they were like? All Sorrow muttered before taking her leave. Sorrow's assistants assured me that her foul mood was simply a product of long working hours. Repairs to the ring have been modest at best. I could tell from the dark patches under their eyes that they've been working the same. So going back to the timeline, as I have been jumping around to different texts, it is clear that A. Hawthorn's books are before Waiting Sorrow left the Wizard's Court, as she is still actively working in Omnitas. And for our final volume, number 4, we are in Skywatch Archipelago, in the Southern Wizard's Tower. An Unofficial Histories of the Wizard's Court, Volume 4, by A. Hawthorn, signed 716 AE. Catching a Dagda in Omnitas is like sighting a rare bird in the wild. She's the only wizard that hasn't taken over a bastion, despite the bastions of the natural and the obscure being without proper leadership. I've also had less than one conversation with her from start to completion, so yes, I'm a bit anxious, especially after Sorrow's dismissal. I tracked her down in the Wizard's Tower. We were all stranded inside while Isgarin shifted Omnitas towards warmer skies for winter. She was sitting on the window ledge, watching the clouds as we traveled. I assume she's heard of my impossible task, because she scooted left just enough to make room for another. Sit, and I sat. Despite not leading a bastion, Dagda's always had the commanding tone of a leader. I would follow her, I think. We sat in silence for a long while, watching the clouds. Dagda is very thoughtful, despite the rumors. Eventually, she spoke. She described to me that day, which I quickly parsed as being the moment Mabon and Waiting Sorrow saved her from the Jotun. Her expression flickered from frustration to anger as she described the events, most of which she readily acknowledged. Dagda learned from Mabon after her ascension. She only remembers faces, some names. She was the daughter of a female chieftain, one of the few female chieftains in Jotun history. After being born of magic like her, the elders of the greater tribe feared Nuada's power. This was well after the age of Jotun magic, after all, so they killed her. And most of Dagda's family. They probably would have killed Dagda too if she weren't so young. Knowing what I do with the Jotun, being collectors, likely wanted to keep those genetics intact. They likely viewed her and those powers as a tool. They stifled her magic as best they could. She doesn't remember those parts. Doesn't want to. Her arms twitched as she spoke, possibly a reflexive response to things endured. Mabon found her while he and Sorrow were tracing migration south. Jormeg had birthed another champion, further displacing life in the north. That, she said, is most of it. She couldn't recount the rest, even if she wanted to. Before I took my leave, she touched my arm, a delicate gesture for such a warrior. She told me to be light when asking of the past. The wizards all chose to ascend and leave their past lives behind, but that doesn't mean they don't yearn for those threads, to reach out and remember. And that concludes today's book reading. I appreciate you following me through this journey, and if there is an interest for more, please let me know. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I don't know, maybe see you around.